And welcome to the Spring 2016 Perkins Technical Assistance webinar. We have a number of bodies on board, and we'll look forward to getting into the conversation. Just a couple of the norms. Everybody's muted, so we're going to ask that we get our questions that you may have through the question panel on the right side of your screen, or wherever it is on your screen. Just click the question box, and then that will post questions directly to we as the organizers for the webinar. But let's go ahead and jump into the conversation. Maybe. First of all, I want to thank everybody out in the field for all that you do. The region coordinators, the fiscal managers, the Perkins managers, school administrators. Right now, we're really in a renaissance in career and technical education in the state of Oregon. We have weathered the storm of the financial recession. Our programs that have survived are programs of integrity, are programs that are able to demonstrate the value added to the entire educational program. And we have data that is supporting that, that's showing how career and technical education can literally be a tool to help those schools who are struggling to encourage student attendance, student engagement, student graduation, academic performance. So that whole spectrum, and you guys are the worker bees, you guys are the rubber that hits the road, you guys are the individuals that help to make it happen. And in conjunction with CCWD, Oregon Department of Education, the Perkins Network, we're all able to help to move this forward. And we know there's a lot going on in light of the pathway funding, in light of the revitalization grants, in light of the added work of STEM. And it's really because of the beauty of what CTE is. So again, thank you from the Department of Education. A quick reminder of the Perkins of, or the purpose of Perkins 4, not the Perkins of Purpose 4. The Perkins Act of 2006 was enacted, and it really was a game changer from what the previous vocational education acts had been, the previous Perkins. It really became tied to accountability. It became, what are you doing to move the mark on students? And in that, all the Perkins expenditures are tied to improving, enhancing, expanding, and modernizing programs. And in that, it's not necessarily just adding more seats as a program expansion, but it is literally, what are you doing to take the program to the next level, elevate it to another level. There's the 5 core elements associated with the Perkins program of study that all expenditures, all Perkins activities should be able to be tied back to, and it's a very direct connection. What deliverable is it, and what are you trying to move the needle on? And aligns to current industry standards. And the industry standards and the business partnerships is very key. And to innovate versus supplant. Districts have the obligation to take the base load, and then how is Perkins pushing the program to the next level? So that's our Perkins purpose, and you'll see that as we move forward in some of the other conversations that I'm going to share. So here are the objectives of today's conversation. We're going to get you an introduction to some new Perkins Technical Assistant Learning modules. We're going to give you an update on the application and annual report. We're going to discuss the Uniform Grant Guidance, the new EDGAR, and then we're going to talk about how Perkins funds are meant for approved programs of study. That's for both college as well as the high school programs. You need to have a partner, you are connected, you are married together in the program of study endeavor. We're also going to talk about the calendar, the timelines, and things that are happening in the Perkins world. And then we have a whole bunch of kind of administrivia stuff in the budget narrative, where to access it, the 5% administration, the 10% professional development, and then where to find information. And then we'll conclude. We have a couple of items on data, which we will address at that point. So with that being said, this is something that Donna and I have been sharing, discussing for a number of times, is our where are you able to go to get the information? We are coming together at the Department of Education to put together some learning modules where you can jump into this landing page, which is the Perkins Implementation Resources. And we're making some changes to the website. So this is a new page title, and it used to be the Technical Assistance page, but we're changing that, and we're combining a couple pages. And the fiscal information is going to be here, and the technical assistant webinars are all going to be parked right here. And in fact, the first one is already up. And the first one is titled Accessing the SIP Budget Narrative. Where do you go? How do you get to the district website? What do you need to do to get in, to get access to update your SIP budget narrative? And then the template respective of that. So this is already up. The YouTube video is already up. You can jump in. And the goal is that these are little mini webinars, so we don't make this webinar 2 hours long when all you needed was just a little bit about the inventory and how to do inventory, or a little bit about the annual report. So you could watch that annual report webinar, which is about 12 minutes long, and you'd have everything you need to know about the annual report. You're curious about supplanting, so you go to the supplanting webinar, and Reynolds gets on his soapbox, and that's a 20-minute webinar. So here are some of the topics, and the topics will evolve, and even from the standpoint, the field, as you say, you know, I'm really struggling. Do you have a frequently asked questions on this area? And then we would go ahead and put that together, and then they will even be included, a number of them, with some frequently asked questions, kind of an FAQ. But here are the topics that are going to be lined out, and I'll jump backwards, and they're all going to be parked at this ODE page. So, moving forward, Denise Brock is going to share with us a little bit about the basic grant application.
All right, hello everybody, and thank you for joining the webinar today. Fortunately, there are just a couple of changes on the basic grant application, and they're very minor, but I did want to highlight those today for you. Move on. The first notable change of the two is that the submission contact for the grant plan has changed. It is now changed from Barbara O'Neill to Lauren Dressen. And I'll show you in another slide where to access the guide, and all that information is in the guide as well as the application. And it's due June 30th, and that's also included in the guide and the application. So that's one change. And then the second one is that the annual report is asking for a prioritization and ranking of support activities. And this is found on page 3 of the application. And there's a number of reasons we're doing this, but it's basically for data collection that's going to help us with our annual reports to the feds. And of course, the annual report is going to be due on November 16th, 2016. And same as last year, the release of funds, 20% is released July 1. If the CTE data submission, the application, and the SIP budget narrative are all complete. And then the remaining 80% upon the approved application, October 1st. Similar to what Reynolds was just sharing, there are places on our website where you can access this information in more detail. If you go to the Perkins 4 under the CTE page, it says Grant Application Annual Reports. You'll see that I've uploaded the local plans for 2016-2017. You see the basic application there. It's in a Word doc, which is writable, so you can just fill that in and send it off to Lauren. And then the guide, which has also been updated with all the correct dates and contacts, and of course that goes over, step by step how to, do the SMART goals, how to do the 5 core indicators, or 5 core elements in the indicators. So my information is also on there. So if you have any questions about filling in the application or doing the annual reports, feel free to email or call me. And I'll turn it back over to Reynolds, who will continue on.
Are there any questions explicit to Denise in regards to the application for 16-17 or the annual report for 15-16? And as we get into the calendar here shortly, we're going to look to see how things overlap and we understand the complexities of the alligators you're trying to wrestle. Put some of them to rest, some of them you're trying to wake up. So no questions, and you can come back and ask questions on the annual report at any point, so go ahead and post that as you see fit. Moving forward, going back all the way to last year at this time, Donna was referencing the new EDGAR. We are in full effect of the new EDGAR, and in fact, here in a week, I believe there's going to be a supercharged important webinar from the federal level about the Perkins grant management. And we're going to have a lot more information at that point. And we are going to put together a standalone webinar, a learning module, a Perkins learning module that will be a standalone that you'll be able to reference as to what some of the new requirements are. So the big goal, and this is everything here, the big goal is that to get all the federal educational grants on the same page, and then some of the explicit language and rules that are about Perkins are still going to be in effect, but on the financial side, they're all going to be in compliance with the other federal rules grants. Now, one of the explicit examples, and I know we had a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth at this at the summer meeting last year, was no food, and that is the Uniform Grant Guidance rule is 200.432. In that, any food associated to meeting activities respective of carrying out the Perkins grant is not to happen. So the cookies, the waters, the sodas, the coffees, lunches, it's a no-no. So anyhow, more information is going to come out with this about, and the old EDGAR was the Education Department General Administrative Regulations, okay? And that's what Perkins adhered to, but the other federal grants were not on the same page, so we're trying to make it easier for the fiscal managers, the grant managers to know that yes, that's in, and no, that's not. Okay, and the focus of the new EDGARs is internal controls. So what are your policies? What are your procedures? What are your cash management, your allowability, your conflicts of interest? What systems do you have in place at your local level to make this happen? So there's going to be some laxing of what you have to document, but you still need to have that documentation, so when the local monitoring occurs, we show up and we ask you about what is your process for reimbursement? What is your process for, if there is a petty cash or a direct one employee reimbursement model, what is that? Let us see it so we can be sure that it is in place. So more information is going to come with an e-learning module explicit to the Uniform Grant Guidance. But that title, UGG, Uniform Grant Guidance, you should be aware that your business managers and your business offices are going to be talking about it, saying, how does this affect Perkins and what is Perkins doing about it? So you can be ahead of the arc on that. Now, the next level of conversation we want to have is Perkins funding for approved programs of study only. And in this renaissance that's happening with career and technical education, a lot of money is being invested in STEM and other CTE-related activities. Any money that comes from the Oregon State Legislative Body or the Department of Education grant around STEM and CTE, those are monies that have different rules. They are not Perkins rules. Perkins rules are very explicit that the money goes to approved programs of study only. So you've got all this other money that doesn't have the limitations that Perkins has on the funds. You're starting to build these programs, and then you say, hey, Perkins can come over here and take over once our CTE revitalization grant taps out. The answer is possibly. And first of all, you have to be an approved program of study. And then secondly, where's Perkins going to come in? So if the revitalization grant was to go and to totally refurbish a wood shop, carpentry, construction program, all new equipment, all new tools, all new everything, and then we'll say, great, we'll buy all the wood with Perkins. No, that's still a supplanting item. So now the local money, that the revitalization grant, you could have very easily bought 2x4s with it. That was part of what your committee, what your team on the revitalization grant said was needed. And if it was part of what the overarching goal of that program was. So, quick reminder, the 5 core elements of Perkins are, and you guys have heard these, standards and content, alignment and articulation, accountability assessment, what is the technical skill assessment, student support services, and professional development. Every Perkins expenditure, you should be able to come back and tie it into one of these 5 areas. So, what is a program of study? Program of study is a sequenced instruction that ties high schools to community colleges. They are married. And when a marriage is struggling and one is not talking to the other, and they decide to go live in different places, that's not a healthy relationship. Money should not be invested into a relationship that is not healthy. It needs to be a collegial engagement, professional development exchange to where each partner is assisting each other. And if the college is building a rocket ship to go to Mars, and their high school partner is still dealing with wooden wagon wheels, trying to make it across the Oregon Trail, I would say that that partnership is flawed. And how is it that you're being connected and bringing those students on board? Now, yes, the college can be doing all this massive, great stuff, but what is the supports that those students are going to be able to be in line and have a seamless transition from point A to point B? The federal rules of Perkins tie to programs of study. The revitalization grant don't have the same rules of Perkins. You could pay for a ventilation system with the revitalization grant. On Perkins, no. That's the local school, the local state's responsibility. There's going to be additional information on technical assistance model around programs of study, and specifically the investment of funds in programs of study. Next objective, Perkins timeline and calendar. So now is the time. Why do we have this webinar in the spring, and we should have had it here a month ago? Is now is when you're head over heels into your planning. You're looking forward into your next subsequent year, and you're also looking backwards saying, how do we tie everything up? And I said again, now is the time. What is your vision? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And as Perkins managers, as region coordinators, we really lean upon you heavily to enact that vision. What is it that you're doing leadership-wise to help to elevate and take your entire region to a different area, to expand your programs, to include more content knowledge, more technical knowledge? So, in that, you're out doing all your visionary work, you need to remember the deadlines that are out there. So on the Perkins website, if you go to the Perkins administration, the very top link is the operational calendar. As you open up the operational calendar, you will see essentially this content. Here is the dates and deadlines respective of the things that need to be done. If I was you, I would have this just like Donna, posted on her wall in 3 different sides of her cube, as well as she has a calendar highlighted that's color-coded in multi-different colors to illustrate when items are coming in. So, and again, this is one of the alligators that you're having to wrestle, and we understand that. Now, the complexities of the Perkins cycle, and this is where a number of individuals from the outside, and even the teachers, don't really understand the complexities of how the overlay happens. Here is the example of the 3 years that are stacked on top of each other and where they overlap. And we are literally in this middle ground where things are overlapping from the previous year into the next year, and you're even visioning forward. So this magic spot right now is when a lot of stuff is starting to happen. So stay on top of it. Know that you're wrapping up the previous year grant. And on a note on this, there is no carryover in the Perkins grant. Now, yes, you can continue to expend funds beyond the school year in the Perkins grant, but it needs to be for very explicit items. And it's those items that were laid out in advance. It's those items that we do have some extra money because of proper fiscal management. We were able to get our grants in at under time. The professional development that a teacher was finishing up in May only cost us half as much as we thought. So we do have some extra professional development funds. May we invest those, Reynolds, in a specific activity outside of that academic school year? And the answer is yes to that, but you need to be intentional about where you're doing it. Another area that you know and remember is that I have been talking to you about doing your Perkins professional development inside your Perkins professional development on the front side of the grant. So your grant starts July 1 each year. In that July 1, that's where we're wanting your professional development to occur, as I try to write the numbers PD. So you're doing it on the front side of the grant. And teachers can do professional development in the summer. We just want it to be in the current grant cycle, not on the back end of a grant cycle, to where there's no change in students' activities, students' learning, students' engagement from that professional development. So, and I've been beating that drum for quite a number of years, and you're all aware of that. So we will move forward. So as you're meeting with your teachers, as you're meeting with your administrators, looking forward to what's the next step for our consortium, for our Perkins program, and doing that visioning, it then becomes time to start to develop the budget narrative. Now, this is just a couple of reminders, and there is going to be professional development or a technical assistance webinar around explicitly the budget narrative and Perkins allowability. But there's the 5% administration limit. If your school is taking the 5% indirect, is what they call it, you can't go and then take another 5% or administrative costs. And administration is just that, administration. When you're doing paperwork for the grant, when you're looking at data, when you're purchasing stuff, that's all administrative on the side. That's not developing curriculum. That's not helping with professional development. In the grant, you have to have 10% of your total grant going towards professional development, okay? And you have flexibility in that professional development, how that's invested. I know a lot of the grants, most of the grants invest way more than that 10% minimum, but it's a 10% minimum. And we want you to do it on the summer front side. There's the ODE, $5,000. You have any items that's over $5,000, you have to have explicit ODE permission in that. And then it's even what have you done in your local school system to adhere to local purchasing policy for items of that ticket price. And then the rules of supplanting and supplement. Again, there's going to be a webinar explicitly on supplanting and allowable expenses. Object codes. The object codes have been tweaked a little bit. Well, actually, the codes are the same. Some of the titles have changed. And as you open up this document and this hyperlink, and this is going to be posted on the resource implementation page, where it's been changed, there is a slight highlight, as you can see. And this document, these codes come directly from the Department of Education accounting manual. So we're asking you to stick to these codes. And I know some of the business managers who may be on the line really growl at the limitations of the object codes that Perkins presents, and that we're doing so many other things that these object codes are against our internal workings. These are the object codes that we've worked with our business office that we've identified that where money can be parked. So if you do have sub-object codes or other object codes you're treading it to, you need to have that decoder ring or cookie crumb trail that we can figure out where the money's going to from your expense reports all the way back to the budget narrative so we can understand where they're at. And let me get out of my little highlighter. In the webinar that, in the learning module for accessing the budget narrative, I illustrate where the budget narrative templates are. And we have templates out there, so as you begin to work on your budget narrative, do it in a Word document or an Excel document. It makes it so much easier, and spell check. Because if you try to sit down and you have a yellow pad filled with notes in your handwriting, and you start to transpose that into the SIP budget narrative, and you get a phone call, it pulls you away from your desk, and you don't hit save on that SIP budget narrative, and you get timed out, all of that content is then lost. And then you're back to your yellow pad to say, where was I? What did I say? What was the language I was using? So do it in a Word document. Here is the copy of the Word document, and it is, in essence, here is a tabled framework to where you load that information in. Going back to the Excel template, that may not be needed, and in fact, I envision that most of the region coordinators won't bother with it. With the new budget narrative tool that automatically loads that Excel sheet with the rows and columns in accordance to what your investments are. So they're both going to be posted on the Perkins implementation resource page. So if you want them, use them. If not, don't. So I referred to the learning module. Here is the first learning module. So you can jump in, you can find out how to get access, where to get access, what you need to do to contact your security administrator to get permissions to get access to the SIP budget narrative. This would be ground zero to start as you're working to develop that budget narrative. So, Perkins resources, and I've been referring this all the way through. This is going to be our new page to everything about how to do the Perkins grant management, how to implement, manage your Perkins fiscal side of the house. So the web page is here. It's going through some renditions. In fact, it may even be a little bit different look and feel now. We're deleting out the old content, even though those who've seen the old content and they look at the new content, you're going to say, it's a lot similar, Reynold and Donna and Lauren. And our response is going to be, yes, because we're still in Perkins 4. We're in a continuing resolution with Perkins 4, and it is what it is. It's a mature federal grant. Now, when Perkins 5 comes, I'll need some meds, and things are going to change at that point. But at this point, we're in a continuing resolution. We've got a lot on our plates. Things in the Perkins world aren't changing a lot, but those who are new to the Perkins world, there's a lot to digest. So here is the Oregon Department of Education Perkins landing page. From that landing page, you can jump to the specific subsets of where you're at. So then you would go on to the Perkins administration. In the Perkins administration, you would click on the resource implementation. So Daniel Adams is not here. So he had a couple slides he wanted me to share. And here is some important dates. Here are some important dates that are coming up as far as program update, collections, enrollment, the data side of the house. If you remember back to the fall when we got into the pathway funding is continuing in this biennium. Whether it goes into the next biennium, we'll see. The legislature will determine that. But if you're concerned about your data and pathway funding, now is the time to be asking these questions, and here are the dates that are coming up. There is a conversation that's happening around updating the existing SIP codes. Dan is going to be producing a couple of webinars himself and giving information about this transition. The long and the short is there's going to be no change to students and their technical skill assessment. So even though we may be combining 3, 4, 5, or 6 different zip codes into one zip code by area, your program is going to continue. And I know last fall we told you don't change any zip codes as you do your program update. That not changing zip code, that's what we're dealing with, is we're trying to get things more centralized, more logical to fit to where we're at. In the days of old, it was much like going into a grocery store and you told your kids to go get some cereal. Each kid grabbed a different variety, a different box. Each of the program study in a content area were told to go out and do their program of study application. They would do their program of study application and they'd look at all of the titles up there, and one teacher with an identical program to a teacher at a neighboring school grabbed a different title, much as my children grabbed different boxes of cereal, even though it's the same outcome they wanted. One grabbed the regular Cheerios and the other one grabbed the multi-grain Cheerios. They both had Cheerios, but we're now putting it under the same code. So it's not going to affect. And I will let Dan answer more questions, ping him with the questions, but this change is coming up. You don't need to worry about it until Dan sends you an email saying, okay, here's where it's going to affect your programs. It should not affect it will not affect the pathway funding. So, moving forward, any specific questions for Dan? And we'll address those here shortly. So, review and question time, and thank you again for all that you do. So at today's webinar, we've gone over introducing the new Perkins Technical Assistant modules and where you're going to be able to go to get in-depth, greater information about a specific content area. And then we've talked about the application annual report, giving you a little heads up on the Edgars. We've talked about funding for programs of study only, giving you the timeline link, the calendar link, and giving you some administrivia on managing your budget narrative and where to find the resources. So let's jump into the questions and answers. The question is, the first question is, can a college extend some of the professional development funds to assist high school instructors in training in fields of program of study partnership? Absolutely, and please. In fact, I would envision that your professional development in a program of study for both the high school and the college is done hip to hip. That here is our identified areas of weaknesses. We're looking at our data, and in our data, you see that our technical skill assessment seems to be lacking in a given area, so we are going to target that given area. So absolutely, great question. Next, so the question is, what is the date if you wish to reallocate the professional development funds? Literally at the moment that the funds become available. So right now, you go to your teachers and you say, in the next 18 months, what is it that you want to do? Actually, it'd be 14 months at this point, to change your program of study, to dramatically alter it. And you tell them to go big. And then the teacher comes back to you and says they want to go to the culinary conference that's held in Kalamazoo, Michigan every year. For the culinary arts, this is the best of the best. That's where I want to go. They identify it's going to occur in August of each year, and it's going to be a week. And then you identify, here's the funding to do it. Here's how we can get you there. We can cover your costs. Here's some compensation. Here's the curriculum for it. August rolls around, and they're like, yeah, my niece is getting married. I'm not going to go. So that money then becomes available. You get whatever money out of it. You route the teacher that's non-refundable, so forth, so forth. At that point, you have that professional development funding available. Reallocate that, put it to use. So you go back to the teacher and you say, what other event can you do? And they say, well, there's a December event I want to go to. You don't need to come back to me if you're swapping out same teacher, same program of study, a one-to-one. But come to me when you get into a scenario that it's a massive transformation, that you're taking large amounts of money from the mechanics fabrication side of the house and you're putting it over into the business systems side of the house. The end result, it still has to happen in professional development, but give me the heads up of where the transformation's occurring. Now, if that event was supposed to happen in August and you approach me in May saying, here's an event that was going to happen in August, it didn't happen, can we use this money in June, July, August of the following year to make that 9 months after the fact you want to use those monies? The answer is probably going to be no. And that's where the burden of leadership is, getting teachers exposures to activities that's going to improve their classroom. Now, I know there's a number of professional development activities that happen in June. June is a funny month because it's still a student contact month. Teachers are still in the classroom in the first part of June. On the back side of June, they are not. If a teacher has an activity identified in June, the only way you can utilize Perkins funds is they go at the end of June. So yes, Junes are still fine, but it needs to be part of the professional development plan. If they have a June contract signed up to go to a professional development, it doesn't happen in June, you need to let me know immediately to say we're going to do something in July. The teacher fell down, broke their leg, unable to go, therefore we have a different plan in place. And I hate to give a graphic example of a broken leg as an excuse, but I apologize. Any other questions? Good questions so far. No questions. Call number 2. Any other questions? Call number 3. In that regard, again, thank you. This is going to be archived on the resource implementations page. You can access it anytime, and it should be archived within the next couple days. Seeing no other questions, wait. We have somebody who just jumped in. The question is, if we, at any point along the cycle, that you have to shuffle activities, can that be done? The answer is yes. Change happens. Right now, teachers are putting together their professional development plan, their expenditure plan, their equipment plan, and then there's going to be this 4 or 5 month period where you submit it to the Department of Education, we do the review with the community college side of the house, and we get back to you, and then they've already come out with a new model, a new piece of equipment that costs less or costs more, and then you need to rework your plan. Yes, you can always rework your plan, but it's always safe to keep us in the loop. In fact, if you have a contracted service for a deliverable you're trying to attack or approach, because of another grant elsewhere in your ESD, that service was able to be met, so the deliverable was met, you now have extra money. Can we go spend that elsewhere? The answer is yes, you can. Just let us know what that is. The only caveat is if you're invested in professional development, those funds need to stay in professional development. So yes, the delivery will happen, but we're now going to send some teachers for some extra professional development, or we're going to contract with them for some nighttime, evening type work, where they're going to work with the colleges side by side, and here's the benefit that's going to come from it. So, last call. Thank you guys, and this is going to be archived. If you have any questions, feel free to email either myself, Reynold Gardner, Donna Brandt, Laura Dresen, Denise Brock, or Dan Adams. And signing off.